Welcome to Journeys into Enlightenment with Janet. Join Janet and her friends as they gather at the intersection of consciousness and self-experience, what being consciousness in human form is all about. Access heart-centered awareness with them and feel the difference in the moment that will last a lifetime.
Hello, and thank you for joining me here at Journeys into Enlightenment with Janet. I'm your host, Janet Barrett. You and I are meeting at the crossroads of consciousness and self. Now, usually I would use the word intersections, but it feels right to say crossroads for this episode. Maybe we'll find out later why. In our third episode, we are really opening to the creative relation of consciousness, soul, and self. There will be lots to contemplate and to enjoy over our time together here. My friend Dr. James Johnson is joining us. Both he and I are comfortable in our undoing of our self-reality into heart-centered reality. In listening in, you will feel our comfort, and you too will go many places, and these places, these roads, these paths, these journeys of enlightenment will keep us in multidimensional realities all at the same time. How we relate to our field of heart-centered awareness or reality is individual to each of us. Some of you will feel it easily here in our third episode. Some of you will think you feel it. Some of you might not notice anything but perhaps a deeper breath. No matter. Sometimes our minds take a while to get the message that something is different. Sooner or later, and sooner than later if you're lucky. Anyway, if you're in our reality state, you're with us. Enjoy. Today's topic is consciousness and our rules for living. Core values, rule sets, mindsets, habituated, validating, perceptual biases at play, and the nature of transformational realities. We will break it down, the process of brain, the interaction of mind, and being present in heart-centered consciousness. Our language this episode is simple. Reality is not always easy to converse about, I have noticed, but let me clear up what feels like could use some attention to be useful to you. Neutral. Our first word is really a state, the state that consciousness is. Neutral is our given. I don't think we mentioned it in our following conversation, but it is present in how we reference our realities. Consciousness is not attached to outcomes. It allows for all. We, the self, decide what is what. When we are neutral, we are not in judgment. We look at how the patterns of experience are present and what it is the information really is sharing with us. Reality, the state or quality of having existence or substance. Consciousness is a reality. We are holographic projections of a state of information. See what I mean about talking about reality? Holographic projection. Flash on the movies like What the Bleep Do You Know, Inception, and Interstellar all share in explaining how what you think is real is just a state of projection. It is what reality is. We think it, so it is. We share realities as common ground, and at the same time, we also are in our individual realities as souls and self. God laughing. The Persian poets Hafiz and Rumi write about this. Myself, I find that it is a state of laughter I hear from non-human vibrations that my human ear registers as laughter. It is a vibration in the field of life that is within consciousness. Let's start off today with my husband, Tom Barrett, providing his meditation, Picking a Reality, from his extensive archive of meditations from his website, Interlude and Internet Retreat.
Picking a reality. People talk about reality as if they know what it is. We go through our days assuming that we are dealing with reality. The floor is solid, the food is safe to eat, the cars we see on the street are really there, and the drivers are real people whose intent is not to run us down. These assumptions work pretty well for most of us. because they work, we keep them. Some people construct their universe a little differently. Assumptions that people can be trusted have not worked out for them. They have constructed a darker view of humanity. They don't feel they can trust others. They've noticed that the government and corporations cannot always be trusted. They've noticed that we are not treating our planet with respect, and that we've created cruel and dangerous food production processes. They've noticed that war persists and is not always noble, and that famine and genocide continue to happen unnecessarily. They come to believe that people are not basically good. It appears to them that nobody cares. If they were not already depressed before they came to these conclusions, they likely are now. Since we estimate what reality is based upon consensus, we could be in trouble if we got all these people together, because there are millions of them, and they describe their dim world in remarkably consistent terms. One could make a case, backed up by the news media, that the world is chock full of murderers, kidnappers, torturers, and other criminals on the one hand, and stupid, apathetic people on the other. Some people listening to this may be thinking that this pessimistic view of the world is making pretty good sense. Hopefully we can take this in a different direction. The problem with this unhappy worldview is that it is unbalanced. It only focuses on the negative. It recognizes evil and objects to it. It values justice and compassion, but fails to see them where they exist. It sees the shadow but not the light. In order to be happy and healthy, we need to be able to see the whole picture. We need to recognize ignorance and evil, but not just that. We need to acknowledge wisdom and love as well. We need to know that sometimes people behave poorly and that sometimes they are wonderfully kind. We need to be able to see darkness and know there is also light. The yin-yang symbol is a tool for helping us to recognize these truths. The yin side of the circle is dark, and the yang side is light. Together they make a whole. If we focus on one side only, we have an interesting shape that appears incomplete. It's not a circle or a square or any shape we see often enough that it has a common name. If we look only at one side of the yin-yang, we know we have an incomplete view. At the same time, each side may be represented as containing a spot of the opposite color. There is a bit of dark on the white side and a bit of white on the dark side. This suggests that we should be wary if our take on reality contains absolutes. Good may not be entirely good, and bad may not be all bad. Good people make mistakes, and the worst of us have good moments. Life works better when the reality we accept is not overly simplistic. If we can see the big picture in its full color, including the black, the white, and the gray, we have more information and can make better choices. Consider spending some time meditating upon the yin-yang. Explore its meaning to you. Consider as you do that it need not be a static symbol, that perhaps the circle does as circles tend to do, it revolves. The black and white follow each other around and around. Oh, what might that mean to you? As you go through your day interacting with the universe, recall that you are constructing your reality based upon sense impressions and thoughts. Stop occasionally to observe how you are doing that. Notice your body sensations and observe how your mind creates your world from them. For instance, when you touch a tabletop, how does your mind get the idea of hardness? When you touch a feather, how does your mind get the idea of softness? When you interact with a person, notice when you are judging them. Are you viewing them as all good or all bad, or using some other all or nothing filter? Seek to become aware of the process where you interpret the world into your preconceived reality so that ultimately you can relate to it in its suchness, just as it is beyond the screen of thoughts, symbols, and definitions.
This episode of Consciousness and Our Rules for Living is you, me, and my good friend, Dr. James Johnson. We meet in heart-centered awareness. Let me introduce you to him. Jim is another one of my remarkable friends who enjoys much in and beyond the physical and non-physical realms of being. He is a reality traveler and knows well the life of the embodied mystic in disguise and a challenging, defiant energy. Jim's realm is of the spirit, brain, and mind working together. He has degrees and titles, including a Ph.D. and 5 board certifications, and his own knowing supporting him in his over 40-year-long career as a neuropsychologist. He explores deeply in himself as consciousness in form and action in human flavoring. He offers a wide appreciation of references and grace to his clients. He respects and can track those who operate in different states of reality. He offers a connection between those in and around his clients and their abilities to interact in practical terms. He operates his life with a very finely tuned sense of dynamics at play in any one moment and a gift for expressing succinctly in a moment, in the written form, seemingly effortlessly, his experiences of his moments. We met years ago through the Matrix Energetics follow-up playgroups I would offer to local participants. He never said a word, just took in the information and fall backward and into, as we all do in the quantum engaged reality framework that ME is. These days in my men's group, Jim still falls backwards and into, but now he talks and always cracks me up in cosmic laughter. We look up words all the time to appreciate intention and usage and where they intersect. We enjoy him and his wife and life partner Marilee. She is the key to his success in life and powerful in her own right, and who can also make your antennas stand up. Some titles and definitions of him might be rebel, pain in the ass, mystic, and also at heart, always a man who walks lightly in being. He knows himself well and can let go of that. He leaves me in awe most of the time with his ability to identify what life is filled with. He's a learned man who appreciates the language of words and forms and moments. There have been many times over the last several years that if I was into envy, I could have been. Good thing I know that we are all one in our reality of being, and that he is an extension of me as I am of him, so I can enjoy what he accesses and spent good money to learn and hone his skills. His deep love in being aware of the intersections of consciousness, soul, and self make him perfect to share about our topic. Hi, Jim. How are you today?
Good.
Well, let's see. Our first episode, it was about consciousness and what all that meant, and heart-centered awareness and realities. And in my second episode with Mateo, it was about, she's a medical doctor, and it was about how it's always spirit in a human form, and what that was all about, and the different ways of body, mind, and spirit in Western culture, use those framework. Indigenous people don't. They all consider it all one, sharing spirit and soul. And what I wanted to cover with you was about consciousness in our core realities, that human self that it sets up the framework. We want to call it soul that's out of body and in body itself, what that dance is all about for any of us. And what would your take be about that? And then I want to make sure everyone's in heart awareness.
So maybe before I start speaking, we can just kind of go into heart awareness.
Okay. All righty. Let's do it, everyone. Because Jim is so excellent at this, and I'm sure, I have no doubt, that by the time we get done with this conversation, you'll have been around the block or two. So just notice, right? Just go to the physical heart first. Be grateful for it beating. It's the signal that we're alive. There you go. And then go to the emotional terrain, right? Everyone has emotions. They're user-friendly or not, depending upon how we've set them up in our core realities. So we'll explore more about that. But just notice that you do have a lot of emotions up and running. And just let that go over there. And just see if you can notice some distinctions between you and your emotions. And then we go to the core, the essence of all, which is what consciousness is. It's that state of potential where it's the stillness of the sacred, of the infinite, of the all. It's how we connect to that quiet. Some might experience it as calm. I don't know. There's all kinds of different ways, as many of us as there are.
I experience as expansion.
Okay, expansion. Yes, very much so. So just in noticing that, let's see. Yeah, go there, everyone. And just enjoy this conversation that I have with Jim. And it's not that you have to do anything. There's no performance art. But what probably will happen is it will start to tag in your awareness of a relaxation, an easing, and a new thought that'll show up, a new awareness that'll show up. And as we talk about how we form our realities and those mindsets, and this is all about being present in this place right now with us, where it can be different, because there is a different sense of time and space. It's malleable in consciousness. And we can just relax it and enter in the state of, what if it could be different? And it is. And we're accessing potential. So it's before it's energy, it's potential. And how to take our rules and the patterns of behavior and thinking and just open them up and let something different show up. So that's what this hour is all about. Okay, Mr. Jim, what you got there?
So I noticed that as we begin the process of opening, the way that I address the question shifts. So initially I was addressing it from a place of where words have meaning and there are specific things. And then as the heart opens up, I begin to notice that I will talk about it in a different way. And the way that I'm talking will probably convey a little bit of contrast. We'll see. It's kind of an exploration. So when I think of core reality, the word core, it's located in space for me. I'm going to look for it like in the middle of something, or I'm going to ascribe to it a certain density. So when you think core, like the core of an apple, you're thinking about the center of something. And so I'm a neuropsychologist, and neuropsychologists have identified something called the default system in the brain. And the default system is how you know who you are. It's a particular little area that's, like about a fourth of the size of a penny that determines your whole identity.
Wow.
You can imagine the whole brain, and then you have this tiny little place, this little default system, which reminds you that you have an identity, that you have a name, that your awareness appears to be located somewhere in space.
Mm-hmm.
And most of our thought process, our perception, is impacted by that core. So as sensory information is coming in, and you can imagine sensory information is beyond belief at how much intensity there is in light and sound and energy going on around you, let alone all the entities that are communicating with you, the other life forms, trees and people and planets and So this is a huge charge, which is a little inconvenient if you have to put a postage stamp on a letter. So the default system allows you to filter out all of that stuff, and in the process, it has an address on it. So you have a particular name. Mine's a Jim. And so if you say Jim, you'll get an orienting response from me. I'll think I actually exist, and I will have certain personality traits, most of which are a little obnoxious.
I think I mentioned those in the opening.
I will be able to identify problems, which is sort of the default system's best trick, is to identify a problem and then to figure out a way to deal with it. So this is, as a core reality goes, this is what most people's core reality. The irony is that as you go into heart space, what you perceive as core reality begins to expand out, and you're no longer affected by
or confined
perceptual boundaries. Yeah, you're not. Yes, confined. You begin to be permeable.
Right. Oh, everyone, can you feel that? These are these wonderful discussions we have all the time. I'm so fortunate. Wow. Well, that was succinct, Jim. That really gave it a place and a container. And so what we look at is however that identity is getting developed, or what's there to begin with, if we're looking at it from out of form first, and the direction, the individuality, and there you get self-forming. And this identity is tagging all of that. And then when you enter in this heart-centered place, you can open it back up. It gives it a place in order to shift, is what I would perceive from what you said then.
Yeah, and one of the things as you become more involved in paying attention to consciousness, consciousness doesn't actually know any bounds. It isn't. Yeah. It goes through walls and
right.
through perceptions and filters. And so as you're more attuned to consciousness and the way it's playing with you and you're playing with it, even in your core self, you'll notice that there's a wobble in how much you actually believe it or are constrained by it. Once in a while, we have, we get triggered, and a triggering pulls us in tight, makes us sure that we have a particular reality. Maybe we are sure we have a particular problem. But consciousness softens that and makes it more permeable, and we hang on less. And that's one of the shifts that I think that you were inviting as you talk about being open to watching for things being different.
And so we all have core values. We all have mindsets, habituated, validating, perceptual biases at play. And they can be all kinds of things, and they can be more than one. And you'd have to say that people have probably more than they could even concept of these values that are play. And a lot of times you don't know what they are until you run up against it, or the limit of it, or the definition of it in action. And what came to mind for, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking in self-awareness, which is, one of the aspects of becoming more mindful of who you are and opening yourself to consciousness. The self of which you are aware is built of all of these filters that are blind to you until you sort of relax and see them. And the relaxing process involves the opening of the heart. So you have to open the heart, soften, and then you can begin seeing yourself with soft eyes, because when it first shows up, it's you don't like it. And so the softening and compassion and the opening to the self allows you to begin seeing these little filters that you have, and then you can tell that you got a bunch of them.
Well, some that came to mind when I was just sitting here and concepting this episode a couple months ago was that they are so strong. They form our reality. That something gets into play, some kind of thought, feeling, and probably a combination of the two, because it's so strong and powerful that it's imprinted. And for instance, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. I want out of here. Life hurts and then you die. And when people don't always recognize when they're in their bias, which any of these are, but how their life unfolds and fulfills that imprint, that concept that they have. And in this work, we're looking at how that's fine. We don't judge those. What we're looking at is how, when we access through heart into consciousness, that place is where we can notice this information in this way and instigate change if we so want it. Not that we have to, because everyone's here doing something different and personal to them.
Yeah, and as you talk, I'm noticing this what I would call an additional perception, and as I approach this. So initially, I believed in something called facts. I believe that there are the specific bits of information represent things the way they actually are, and in believing that, I can hold something very strongly in place. Well, as consciousness begins to have its way with me, as my heart opens and tenderness shows up, I begin to notice that what I called facts were resonance.
Okay.
That I'm actually just having a little, like somebody had plucked a string on an instrument. And what I call a fact is actually just a little resonance. And I'm resonating with a bunch of other beings that hold that same reality. I'm resonating with a field. And simply by being open to the resonance, I'm not alone with my fact anymore. It just really shifts that quality of reality, so that instead of a fact that's literal draws me in and sticks me to something, a fact that's resonant expands me out and makes me connected and gives me lots of support for the reality, even though I can still believe it's a miserable world and it's all going to hell in a handbasket. Noticing as simply as resonance, there's a lot of people out there who share that with me. That's what consciousness is doing to me.
Yeah, wonderful explanation. Oh, that's great. There's also the part that comes to mind in that, okay, where'd it go? It just went somewhere. Well, Jim and I have these kind of conversations off if something goes somewhere. He's much better at tracking it than I am. There was something back there that was important. Let's see. I doubt I can get there. Okay, it passed along. It wasn't that important. That's it. What you're doing when you talk about the resonance is that you're opening it up. Okay, so an accident happens and 10 people are standing there and they see the car accident. And it's the job of the policeman to go around to everybody to get the facts. And there's the word, the fact. And we appreciate that each of those 10 people was at a whole different place, interior world-wise, where they may have been sharing physical space. But each one of those people was at a different street corner, was in a different relationship, and the view that they got was their view, but totally within their biases and their framework. And that colors it. And it's the job of the policeman to go, okay, what's consistent here? And what is maybe out of the ordinary in those conversations to find out those facts of what really happened, because the people in them are having one relationship to the experience. The people observing it are having another relationship in experiencing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm thinking that in our particular time, with particularly with political events, what a fact has really been called into question. Because, any particular event seems to have an alternate version of facts. And I was thinking, so I'm here as an observer, and I know that I have my own perspective. But if I'm talking to the police officer, I want to give the what I would call a grounded response. I want to give just my observations, just what I can see, what my perspective was, and not cloud it with my emotions. So there's a certain aspect of my reporting that's, sort of grounded in as precise a perception of reality that I have. And then there's the story that my head makes up that sort of colors the information as it comes out of my mouth. And it's I think the coloring of it that affects our politics so much.
Wow. Oh, that was well put. Yeah, really. Because that interior stories that we've all got running and all the multiple realities that we're in at any one time, how present any of us are in our lives in any one moment could be called into question. We certainly know those among our own friends who do this work with us. It's like, wow, that's an interesting framework you got around that. And, where it takes you in how you interact with oneself and also the world around you, right? And that informational flow and where those places are where the biases drop away, which is what consciousness is about. That's why we embrace this so much, is that we let go of that self-defining stuff. And we just go, okay, if this was just information and there's no tag on it, there's no emotion, there's no story, there's no anything, and we just look at the energy present, what can this be? And that's the place, and that's why I enjoy this work so much, because the people that are willing to meet at that place are not in a state of judgment. And you can feel the difference where it's your personal connection, right? But also where...
So when you say bring the energy in, what do you notice in your perceptions as you bring the energy in? Because I think that someone who's new to energy work, this isn't obvious to them. So this is kind of a fun place to play.
What did I say, Jim?
So you were talking about as your perceptions shift, what you're doing is adding in an awareness of energy, because beneath all information is energy. We're first, energy, and then the energy is transformed, but through some sort of a informational organization into matter.
Right.
And so when we're talking, we're always talking about the matter, but we're talking out of the energy. And as consciousness invites you, feel the energy underneath the conversation. So I was curious, how it is you notice that, and if that's something that you're able to kind of share, because I think that somebody who wants to be more in consciousness, if they're more aware of energy, that they'll get there more easily.
Okay. So let me see if I can track that as well as you can track it. For all of those of you listening, depending upon where you are in the spectrum of awareness and how much you have unfolded into what we're talking about as consciousness. Some of you may be very new to it, and some of you have been here a long time. What we're noticing is that consciousness technologies look at the world through quantum physics and mechanics and just the quantum realms. And I'm not a scientist, so I can't give you all the details. But it's an appreciation that there's a place where you can just be present. And you can connect to that, which is what we're always looking to do on this podcast series and in my other show, was that if you just bring the awareness to yourself, because we're so trained to look outside of ourselves for answers, to believe in something. And we're just shifting the whole focus of that into being. There's nothing about doing. And we're so oriented into doing, and that we want to be doers who be. And really, it's about beers who express. And as that expression, it looks like we're doing something. So what we're talking about, and I'm trying to keep there, Jim.
Yes, I can feel it.
Okay, is the awareness that if you allow for something different, because mind is a wonderful control mechanism, and that's what it does. It interprets, it sets up perceptual biases and puts the reality together. What you have to appreciate that what you think you are is not what you only are. It is how you're showing up, but there's so much more here. And that what we're engaging with is that you look at your hands, for instance. You got two hands and you can see them. And you can probably see all the space around your hands. You can see your hands in relation to things. That the space in between is as real as what you perceive your hands to be. That there is information, and we call it information because you got to call it something. And I'm sure there's a reason why we call it something, but it's no different. It's just in a different awareness. You're holding it in a different state of awareness. And so when we're doing energy work or consciousness or all the labels, and this is where all these different trainings and modalities and history, metaphysics, religion, spirituality, all kind of are trying to describe probably the same thing, but in their own pattern of belief or awareness or acknowledgement. We're looking at being free of those contexts. We're looking to step out of those and say, well, if I could just notice this in a new, different way. And I want to do that only because I realize that I've hit a wall in how I'm living my life in some way. We all have issues. We all have problems. We all have these things that self calls an issue and a problem, and society and its force and all that kind of stuff. So we notice that there can be a difference between what this wonderful mind is busy concepting and creating and making real, different from what we feel, what we connect to, and there's unclarity. And what we're looking to do is to invite ourselves back to the place where we are just energy, as Jim described. We were energy, we were essence before we formed. So then we go to this place, and this is what we're inviting you to be in this place with us in this moment, and to develop that and let go of how you might have been told this was, let go of what your neighbor thinks, let go of what you think is real. And we invite you to just be what we call present, like Eckhart Tolle talks about all kinds of different things. That in being present means setting aside your story, your issues, your problems in a certain context. And so we're not saying they didn't happen and those different things. We're just setting aside them being present. We're just moving them over a little bit.
So let me
yeah.
just...
Is that kind of getting there where you wanted to go?
So I get to listen to you, and I get to listen to the language that you're using, which is how your mind is attempting to interface with an exploration of the energy. And it's very much like somebody who's learning for the first time to walk on a high wire. You know, maybe the high wire is just a foot off the ground, so that you're not going to hurt yourself if you fall. But every step that you take, you're trying to find your balance, and the balance is an interaction between you and the energy and gravity around you. And this is the exploration, and it steps out of your identity into the unknown. And I watched you doing it as you're demonstrating it both with languages and with the energy that you were exploring, kind of palpating it.
Thanks. Now, everyone, you need to appreciate that Jim and I are not sitting here together. We've got a couple of miles between us. So he's there, I'm here, you're wherever you are, and we are what is called quantum entanglement, that we can notice these same places and share in a state of awareness that has no form. It's a state. It's not an event. It's a state. And it's one of those ways that we invite ourselves to be open and to understanding and appreciating how we organize being, how mind organizes itself. And that in understanding that this is what we do, we can bring that awareness into play, this state, and change what we think we know. And it's the invitation that what we think we know is only what we think we know and is not necessarily real to anyone else other than ourselves. And it's subject to bias from outside influences, emotional influences, how your leg feels. It's subject to many things, because I think any one moment is a fusion of multi-dimensional dynamics at play. And that's what life is. That's where combustion happens, is where all these things come together. And all of a sudden you have something you identify as a thought or as a feeling. And we always are bringing it back to this space, this state, where if time and space are malleable, then how you've organized, how you experience yourself in your real world can be malleable also. So how's that sound?
One of the things that I notice while you're talking is that as human beings, as me as a human being, I really like certainty.
Mm-hmm.
And
is that control, do you think, certainty when you say that?
No, to be sure of something.
Yeah.
Just to know it for real, really in your bones, know it.
Yeah.
And what happens as you move from a fact reality to a consciousness reality is the nature of certainty changes.
It does, doesn't it?
So you can sort of check in yourself and go, well, in what way did it change? So for me, I notice it went from, let's see if I can do this here, because I don't actually know this. So it went from a sort of point in space reality where you can be certain that my glasses are laying on the desk, or the cat sitting on the chair, to I have a sense that I'm here, and there's a vibrational certainty to it, a sort of resonant certainty that makes every cell in my body come alive. But it's not based in a fact. It's simply just like singing in harmony. It's like you just are melting into the reality around you, and that melting process is also explosive. It's generating huge amounts of energy. So it's a very different quality of certainty.
Boy, you got that right. So everyone, if your head is still on, it's okay. If it's not, that's okay too. So that is what's so appealing, nourishing, expansive to me about this work, right? And in living in this framework, and that you get all this sublimely delicious, can be very, very subtle, but then it can be very explosive too, because it's just the nature, I think, of how we've encoded what those stories and problems and issues have been holding. It's all information to me. And I'm always busy noticing the flow of information and energy as opposed to the emotion or the specificity of what it was. It's someone can say something and I'm going to register all the dynamics, and I won't say all. I can notice several dynamics at play, and so often we say something, but that's not what we're thinking. That's not what we're feeling. That's not what there's any support for. It's the habituated response that's active, and awareness is not yet there. So, wow.
And there's an adjustment. I noticed that you make it. It's like you begin to talk, and then you realize that what you were saying wasn't exactly accurate. There's something going on. There's a feedback loop in the background that shows up that I don't think most people experience. I mean, you're just, people normally talk as if they're talking about a specific reality, but when you were just talking, you said, I noticed such and such, and then you went, oh no, I need to adjust that because that's not accurate. There's something that happens in the background that consciousness does, and after a while, I believe that you hear all kinds of realities to helping you adjust your perception so that you begin to speak more like a choir than a person who's giving speaking with a single voice.
That is wonderful articulation, Joe, because that is the truth of it, and that's the way I notice myself in my world, and in being me and being in this form and being this way and whatever those definitions are, is that I do hear what I say, and there's so much Morphic field about, you never listen to yourself and all that, but and that's over there, because I think as the more you embrace yourself from your essence and consciousness and however you want to refer to it, that it says, yes, really? And it invites this conversation, because I've organized it so that it has value to me, to be able to hear what I say, to be able to feel what I do, and connect to also the place that says, what if we tried this approach? And I know a lot of people, especially in their frameworks, their core setups about life and stuff, is that we discredit that inner voices. We discredit, we put aside, we deny, we resist. We have all of these wonderful words and states to not hear our truth, Because to hear our truth is going to challenge that self-identity that you were talking about that got formed and really doesn't consider itself as needing to change unless something changes it, I suppose. I don't know how that alignment works. But that in
let me say a little bit about that, because I think that's really, really important. To simply say, in the beginning, our perception of ourself is little, because we are little when it forms. Everybody, you look up, you raise your head, and you see the adults around you taking care of you. The world is a very big place, and what happens is we end up with filters that hold a little spot for us.
Depending upon how those bigger people around us were, right? Don't you think? I mean, that's part of that formation.
Even if all those people were really benign and they were really loving and happy and inviting you to join them in their bigness, you still got little filters.
Okay. Oh, that's true.
And if they were big and hostile and nasty, you want to keep your little filters, because it's the only safe place for you to be.
Yeah, got it. Okay, we got it.
So as you're observing yourself, and the simple piece of information, who you are is a tiny part of your brain. Well, what's going on in the rest of your brain? Well, that is infinity. There are no limits to what's going on in the rest of your brain. When you have 1 trillion connections in your brain, you simply can't count that high.
And you don't want to, right? I mean, there's some people that are going to really take off on that, but I'm like, what's the point? After a couple of them, there you are. That just creates more distance. That just creates more self trying to analyze and, that left brain going nuts. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm sort of back on a point that you had earlier, and let's see if I can get it. So as you invite consciousness, the toning of who you are, the new dimension of self is like someone who's a musician, and they can hear the tone in the universe that they're adjusting their perceptions to, and it has overtones and undertones and resonance to it. So as you're tuning into it, it just gets bigger and bigger and creates this expanding wave. And you and the universe are that wave. How do you like that?
That's good. Then what do you do with that, Jim? Is this where we transform these biases?
Where you surf.
This is where you surf.
Waves are for surfing. Waves are to just delightfully enjoy like a lunatic. Throw your arms up, just celebrate being here, being you.
Yeah. It's not about doing anything in this place that you're describing, It's just about the sheer joy of experiencing life and all the realms of connection that are provided in that awareness, in that moment. And that's lovely. You can surf on that. That's true.
So the brain has a little game that it plays. Okay. Once you find these little resonances, they dump dopamine in there, which is you're feeling complete, satisfied, connected. Everything shows up there. It's as if the universe said, yeah, you got it, baby. We want to join. And everybody wants to be part of that place. So it isn't just you in the resonance. It's you now have invited a party.
Yeah. And it's just you being you and not having to take something to be at that place.
Yep.
Right? It's the natural forces at play within us that are available to us, and the delight of chemistry. And this part of chemistry, it's delightful. All right, now where do we go? What are we aware of? Okay, so let's go back to. Oh, be quiet. Let's go on to. Okay, we will go back. We'll go on to. So there we are, and it's not about doing. You've described so well about being, and that's us in our freedom, which I associate with the out of form state. I think that's whatever I hear from people, that the soul's definition of self is where there's a container. And as soon as you're in something, then there's that out there, and that out there is freedom, and we ascribe to that in lots of different ways in our realities. And I think I hear most from anybody is that they just want to be free to do what they want, and I'm like, well, I think that's the key, is how to be free to do what you want within form, not having to check out. And so how we do that, how we embrace freedom, which means you get to make choices. That's what we're doing when we're doing this work and in this state, is we're bringing that energy is very much a part of this, and we call it potential. We call it, I don't know, probably lots of different things. In the moment, that's not the important part. It's just about experiencing.
You're describing a process. Okay. Again, let me see if I can make it explicit. So as we're headed in a direction, human beings have this ability to perceive that actually they move in directions. They can go from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. And they create a concept in their head, an idea of where they're going. And then they negotiate with the furniture and the air and whatever is around them. They negotiate the difference between what they've conceived and what they're perceiving. And so you were just describing that process. And so I thought, well, that I want to make that as explicit as possible.
Conceiving and perceiving. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
And you conceive direction, but you only perceive presence.
Okay, you can conceive direction. I like this. But you can only perceive what?
Presence.
Presence, where you are. You don't know how you got there. You're just there. Okay.
You're never anywhere but here.
Right. So those two processes are going on all the time.
Yep. And as I listened to you talk, I went, that's a negotiation. We're constantly negotiating.
Okay. And so wherever there's negotiation, something different can happen.
Yep.
And that kind of sounds like in the difference between intention and expectation. You want to go somewhere, and the expectation says, nah, you're not going there. You're going to go over here. And this is that interplay. Okay, so that's a great... does that make sense to you, Jim? That's what...
Keep going.
Right.
You haven't got this worked out yet. I'm waiting.
And well, in this is too part of core values and creating transformational realities and making differences and breaking the habituated response that so often most of us embrace all the time unknowingly, because we're not supposed to notice them till we notice them, is that I want to do something. So there's an intention. And I do everything I can to make that happen, and it doesn't happen. And so I get angry, I get frustrated, I blame other people, blah, 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 blah. When if I had just been quiet for a moment and said, what's going on here? I would hear, well, that's good for others, but not for us. I would hear the expectation that's behind that could be in the challenge place of the conceiving and the perception. So you can feel the two differences, and so then nothing happens.
Let me take it a little bit farther.
Okay.
This emerges. You know, everybody's full of shit. That's just the way we come. So that's my caveat before I speak. But I hold a sort of energetic bias as I'm going backwards. I mean, you started from the place where people get frustrated, they have an intention, and that intention isn't coming to be. And then you softened, you opened yourself. And in that opening, I often look for the powerful positive energy that's at the core of every human being, that's at my core, and then come back through and see where that positive energy was not allowed to fully resonate and express itself. That gives me what went wrong in my perception of the process before, and what will shift this time, and it will shift to open that really powerful positive place.
So what you just described is the ability to track information, to see the difference of what's expressed and then where that's really coming from, and where it's in alignment and out of alignment, because where you find yourself is where you find yourself. And so much about life would seem to be, how the hell did I get here? You know, is this a place I like, or is this a place I don't like? And if it's a place I don't like, how did I get here? And if it's a place that I like and I go, oh, I want to do this again, how do I do this again? And it's changing your orientation from self, which is event-based, to consciousness, which is informational based. It's state based. And so in realizing that if you like the place you're in a certain state of a resonance with it, and all you have to do is just keep that open. If you're in a state of resonance that you don't like, you're still in a state of resonance, and the potential, the possibilities, the availability of other information coming in is present, and if you so choose, it will engage. Well, that sound about right. I think that's about it.
Yeah, and the choosing, I think of normally when we we're choosing something.
Yeah, right.
We're focusing in and holding on to something. Actually, this is a choosing that's backwards. So this is a softening and opening. You're choosing to be present to what's there. So it softens and opens rather than looks for something specific.
Right, and then you get into the language of self-sabotage, and you did this and all that, and none of that is helpful, because what's in play here, and that's just self, that's just, that's the trying to make chaos, or it's creating chaos, whatever it's doing there, is that it's none of that. It is about inviting that huge, infinite, expansive intelligence essence that's in all of us, that consciousness core that we all reside in, to play. And when I'm in a user-friendly relationship to it, when I'm not in resistance to it, when I'm not in any kind of energy dynamic other than, oh, yes, that invitation will set up way beyond, it's not on a self level saying, oh, I'm going to choose this. We use that because we need some kind of way when you're talking about states. It's like, what is that? Where is it? And so we do tag ourselves as the center of our universes, which is appropriate, in how we relate to the information in ourselves, and in inviting that it's possible that there are things in my life I'd like to have different. Not because I'm a failure, not because I'm a problem child, not because I'm a princess, not because. I would like to enjoy something different. And it's really just a different place of orientation that we're talking about.
A lot of times, we're so used to using a problem model. So when we start talking about differences, it's as if you're going away from something and going towards something that's going to fix something. And when you use a resonant model, you begin to realize that what it is the discovering the richness of your wood. When you make an instrument, you pick a wood that will really get the richness of the string when it plays, so that it resonates and voices. And the experience of resonating and voicing to new realities is just deeply satisfying.
Oh, it is, isn't it? I think it also, part of that conversation there is about how we make judgments, that there are all these distinctions happened before the judgment got set. And any one of those could have been where the judgment got set, but it didn't. It got set here. And so we have an orientation, we have experience, and that gives us distinctions. And at some point, doing, I guess, to the imprinting, to the developing perceptual bias, there's all these things that happened before we set that. And what we're doing is we're taking the judgment off and we're going back and opening up to where all the distinctions were that were just as possible, but at the time weren't within the framework. And now we're inviting that new back into the play, and a new judgment can be made. A new pattern can form. That sound about right?
It's fun to sort of feel the energy pooling around the words and kind of washing up against them, and then just sending out their little waves like dropping a pebble in a clear pond.
Well, the challenge of talking about something that's nebulous at best. Though I would say we are in form of it, right? We are the form of it. Because everyone's, and that's why I focus on language, during the episodes, is because everything can be interpreted. It will be interpreted, whether you're trying to be as clear as possible about orientation and remove all what one might be triggered by. But we can be triggered by anything, to be honest. So, you try and negate that. You also try and navigate, is really what it is. We look to navigate through informational fields and going, okay, what is my bottom line here? What is it that I want to have happen? And how do I get there? Right? And in this work, you can go, okay, what's my intention? And my intention is that the state, the container, what we're calling heart-centered awareness, consciousness, field of unified consciousness, whatever, cabbage, whatever the convenient term is, to describe something that has no form, but because we are anchored experiences, self is an anchored experience, we're looking for that anchor intuitively and instinctively. And so we say that it's a state and it's a holding place that has no form. And then the mind gets to go nutty over that. And you just have to go, okay, just go with it. Just go back to particles. And then there you're inviting the photons of light, the photons have a little biomass. You're inviting the resonances and the information and the stories to just be present in that form once again, so that you can interact in new ways. And it's about riding those waves, certainly is. And I think you can feel those in this moment anyway.
Yep.
Well, Jim, our hour has come to a pass, so we're close enough. I'm so hoping you'll come back and join me another time on another topic about consciousness, because you are just such a remarkable friend, and I so appreciate your essence. It's always at play, no matter what form it's taking. So let me just, any closing words you'd like to leave people with?
Just riding the wave.
Just ride the wave, huh? Yeah. And I think it's important for people to know that it's a no-fault system, right? That wherever you are is where you are. And one thing you feel with consciousness is you feel that absolute, you can interpret it as love, because I don't think consciousness is really emotion-based, but it allows for emotions. But it feels like that. In that calm, in that stillness, the sacred, whatever you want to frame it, is that it is grace, it is warmth, it is support, it is non-judgment. And when those are all present, it is going to feel like love, right? And you hear God laughing. And I realized a couple of weeks ago or so that I hear God laughing a lot. I always have. And that it was really that tone, the human ear interprets it as laughter. But that's that resonance. And I'm sure many of us have had all kinds of different experiences. So I invite all of you to start listening for God laughing and see what happens. And thank you, Jim, so very much.
Thank you.
And all right, and we'll catch you the next time. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Stop. Oh, Jim, that was great. Did you enjoy yourself?
Yep.
Will you do this again with me sometime?
Sure.
Okay. See, I told you it could work. Okay. All right, sweetie. Thanks so much. All right. Have a great day. Tell Marilee we look forward to seeing her sometime.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Our recommended associated works this episode include the writings of the Persian poets Rumi and Hafiz, who talk about God laughing. On our podcast webpage for episode 3, you will find links to both Amazon for Hafiz and God laughing and a link for Rumi wisdom quotes. I would also recommend any books or YouTube videos with Dr. Fred Alan Wolf. Dr. Wolf is a theoretical physicist specializing in quantum physics and the relationship between physics and consciousness. And the same goes for Amit Goswami, Ph.D., who is also a theoretical nuclear physicist and has been a member of the University of Oregon's Institute of Theoretical Science. He's considered a rebel. Both men have written extensively about physics and consciousness. Here are your consciousness cookies, those ageless little bits of wisdom from across the ages. Don't let someone else's opinion of you become your reality. Les Brown. And from Albert Einstein, there's the reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And for me, we are self-defining creatures. Check your list. How do you define yourself today? Give yourself permission to be different from the you that was yesterday and long ago. That is your journey. Reality in the making. We are really reality generators. Most often we don't notice or are not paying attention when we are creating our personal and shared realities. Our frameworks of self-identity and how we engage the world around us often sneak up on us. They can get set by emotional fixations. Something happens and we react emotionally, and it is powerful enough to create a judgment in our being, our identity. Then future life choices in that bias reflect this as a new reality state to engage in. In the quantum realms, potential engages as energy, creating vibrations that contain states of awareness, or something like that in my awareness. They ripple out until they run into other ripples from around us, and interactions take place. When an event happens, it is the state reference that is engaged. You are now in a state of being in a pattern that continues in expression. Long after the event has happened, and now in the past, the state is still active, affecting and coloring our identity and biases. The past is continuing into the future. Being present between past and future is key. Only when one is in the same state as the pattern can the state reflect change easily. Often, right in the moment, its effects can be felt. The shifts can be observed in the state change in our sense of time. You can sharpen your awareness to know immediately that something is different. That is what we are actively engaging in. We don't know what or why or how. We just feel a difference. Like when you are accessing heart-centered awareness and things seem to soften in you as you listen to this episode. They are. It is real. And that can bring up reality states you are in. Do you test yourself? Do you question what is happening in certain kinds of frameworks of logic and feeling and interpreting? We all do. We have all been there in those emotional moments. They happen all the time, and they become our markers and placeholders of our biases. I hurt and will not go through this again, so I will not blank blank. You can fill in the blanks. And soon they are forming our world. We develop blinders to the potential inherent in any one moment, which is still present but slips out of awareness. That is how the mind works. Its job is to fulfill your settings of orientations about being. It is your particular design in the collective consciousness. Soul and self and mind interact as out-of-form, in-form, essence, and observer. We register experiences in many different ways and levels. We are multidimensional creatures. We have so many levels of reality going on at any one time, and most that we are not aware of. It is too distracting to keep conscious awareness of them all at the same time. A couple will come forward. Two realities, for instance, like your inner dialogues operating at the same time as your social awareness is operating. What you say and what you think can be two entirely different conversations. How many times has someone called us on not paying attention, in class or in conversation? What is a daydream or a catnap but a different reality state that's active? We share realities with others, and we are in resonance with others in their takes on realities, as we are all one when we acknowledge ourselves as consciousness. We lose sight of the differences between us, and now theirs feels like ours, as it is part of the grand and unfolding landscape. Distinctions are needed often. And then you have morphic field dynamics. These are spectrum-oriented energies that shift in its energy. They are powerful holders of feelings, thoughts, truth, someone's truth, off-the-fly comments, misunderstood, rumors, assumption, lies, presumptions, intention, expectation, and sincere emotional responses, and lots of insincere responses, and all kinds of things. We participate in them through our mental and emotional activities. They can reflect culture and cross-culture. They hold collective thoughts carried over from the past civilizations and communities. Urban myth, country myth, age myth, war zone myth, us against them myth, you name it, we got myth, and family myth anchoring it all. We don't call them myths, though. We call them truth, and they are not. We started out of world traditions, remember, and the world influences were quite small. People lived in clans and small groups. All knew the language. Now our stories are myths because they are subject to time, space, emotion, references, the variety of language being translated and understood or misunderstood, and our own biases at play. They are only reality mindsets. We can't change morphic fields as everyone is involved and we're all in different relation to the field. What we can do, though, is look at our connection to them and how we may be manipulating ourselves. As in, The world is going to hell in a handbasket, or people like that are not to be trusted. Often we take types and groups and plaster them with a label that really at once may have seemed funny, but judgmental at the core. Blondes are dumb. The Polish are mechanically handicapped. French embody style and snootiness. Republicans are self-oriented. Democrats are people pleasers and stupid. Rich people are out of touch with those who are not wealthy. Any group can get bound up in our bias and then stuck. It can get caught up in the morphic field, and we reinforce it by not challenging, only accepting it as real. That is the power of social media and how it is manipulated, poorly or wisely. The fields respond and are subject to the prevailing thoughts being generated by us. Reality shared and personal reflect who we are. Our social faces, our internal identities and insecurities, our joys, and overall sense of our essence and self come into play in what we create as real. We manipulate, navigate, choose our connection to the morphic field dynamic. The nature of the morphic field is that in its dynamics it doesn't have to be just negative. They can be positive fields to engage in. Some of my favorites, they include life is about being more than just doing. I am a being who does through inspiration, not a doer who wants to be. Wonder is everywhere, inside and out. Every person is important. Diversity is a strength. Earth is finite, and its resources need to be used judiciously and effectively and replaced. Empowering our children to know right and wrong and self-respect. I leave the world a better place. I am doing better than I think I am, and there is enough for everyone. There are no strangers, just friends not yet met. What are your realities you live in as truth? Thank you for joining me here at Journeys into Enlightenment with Janet. You can continue to join us every 2 weeks here on the CTR network. You can post any questions or comments there, or email me directly at janetandbeyondpodcast.com. For more information about all the elements that make up each episode, they are on my podcast page at my website, www.janetandbeyond.com. You will also find information there about my other podcast show, Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, and about my work with clients. You can sign up to receive my regular weekly blog, Life in the Beyond, Journeys into Enlightenment. You will also find out about the Fuzzy Photons playground groups I offer. Live interactive space via Zoom video conferencing on your favorite device on Thursdays. If you're looking for other regular opportunities to sit in heart-centered awareness with others and explore life, you will find it here. You can follow each episode of this podcast series on my YouTube channel, Journeys into Enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Till the next time, feel the difference in this moment. It is real, and it can last a lifetime.